Here we go with the newspapers. Time now for the news review, and we're joined by Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, political scientist and director of the Center for European Studies at the University of Ghana. Mind you, the news review is brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. We're telling you a bit more about them shortly, but let's get into the papers now. And we have the Ghanaian Times Daily Guide, the Finder, the Ghanaian Publisher. We also have the Chronicle and a few other papers. If time permits it, we'll get into all of them. Doc, good morning. Mache, that's I said, and then I'll pay. Why do you say on the kitchen come Sometimes I feel like speaking something apart from English. Anyway, so we get into it. I hope you're well, though. I hope you've been doing well.
I'm good.
Last time we spoke, I think you had, is it exams or some papers to mark or something of the sort?
No, I had a lecture.
You had a lecture.
I was supposed to go for a lecture. Yeah.
Right. So we start with the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Big boost from mining sector. Ghana attracts 3 gold, 1 lithium mining firms, poised to begin operations by end of year in Ahafo, Upper, East, West, and Central regions. There's also Aveno fire outbreak renders 600 homeless, destroys 450 wooden structures and metal containers. There's also on the Ghana card as sole ID for voter registration. New CI won't disenfranchise any Ghanaian, EC chair assures. President receives credential letters or letters of credence from 5 envoys, and then court orders legal aid to provide lawyer for alleged coup plotter. Let's start with the story on page 4, and then we'll move on to other pages. So, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Mrs. Jean Adukwe Mensah, has assured members of Parliament that the proposed constitutional instrument, which seeks to make the Ghana card the sole identity card for the purpose of registration as a voter, will not disenfranchise Ghanaians. In a presentation to Parliament's Committee of the Whole in Accra yesterday, Mrs. Mensah said the proposed CI would rather enhance the credibility of the Ghanaian voter register, engender confidence in the electoral process, and make the registration of voters a continuous one. Quoting her, she says, "I wish to emphasize that this CI and its provisions are not aimed at disenfranchising eligible Ghanaians. The continuous registration process will be inclusive. It will make it possible to capture all those who would otherwise have been excluded in a limited registration process." Doc, on the back of what we've seen in Nigeria, the complaints about, the biometric system that they wanted to implement, which at a point, was fraught with its own problems. And then we are looking at a Ghana card, which all of those who would want to vote or would qualify to vote or do qualify now to vote do not have. Some have said, good to go ahead with this, but can you ensure that everyone who must have the Ghana card to be able to register will be able to do so? That is the question. Are we there yet? Are we ready? Especially considering that the NIA has a huge debt, which they've not been able to meet, for which reason some of their cards have been seized and all of that. Where do you stand on this? And has she given you enough of an assurance?
I think it's a legitimate question you are asking, and it's very crucial for our forward march into a democracy that we have. If you look at the arguments, I'm tempted to believe that from the goings on in Parliament yesterday, where Professor Kenneth Atefa said that he has received information that the money that they needed to pay for something has been received. I want to believe that it is the money meant for that those cards that have been seized, so that they can take care of that. Interestingly, Professor Atefa has also made us to believe that they can do the registration for the rest of the people, I think 2.5 million, within 11 days or so. If that is anything to go by, then it's a refreshing news, and we can go for that. But he's a man I trust his word, so I want to believe that if giving the resources, he will be able to deliver. If that is the case, then I want government to begin by now, pay all the necessary funds that we need for Professor Tifa to begin work so that by the time we get to, say, somewhere August, September, we should be done with that exercise so that there will be a mop-up exercise that we can, confidently say that we have done the registration. Everybody has a card. We have done a mop-up so that in case somebody turn a new year and then enters into the voting age, he can be covered and all that. Once we get that process going, I think we can be sure that we are not going to suffer problems come 2024. But if we are not able to do that all within this year, then I feel that we need to look at it and look at it again. It is a good thing to have a digitized system, but it is not enough to just have it. But it should work, especially on the day of election. We've seen the experience in Nigeria that on the day of election, they can't even upload results. The BVDs are not working, and the rest of them. I think that Ghana will take serious lessons from this and learn well, so that this year, we should be able to cross our T's and dot our I's, and then get ourselves battle ready for the tax ahead for 2024. I believe if we're able to do this within this year, I think I can raise my chest high and then tell myself that we are confident for 2024.
Well, let's get into some other stories. I'll just touch and go on this. President receives credential letters of 5 envoys. I'm talking about the Canadian High Commissioner. There's also the one from Mauritius, then Guinea, then Bangladesh, and New Zealand. The president has received their letters from all the representatives of these 5 countries. Normal processes in diplomatic circles. But let's focus on the stories on page 11. Big boost from mining sector. Ghana attracts 3 gold, 1 lithium mining firms poised to begin operations by end of year at Ahafo, Upper East, West, and Central regions. Now, a total of 4 new large-scale mining companies are expected to start operations in the country within the next 24 hours. The Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, Mr. Samuel Abujinapo, has announced. According to him, the new mines will comprise 3 gold mining firms and 1 lithium mining company and would boost the country's mining receipts as well as create new employment opportunities for the youth. Mr. Jinapo disclosed this in Accra yesterday when he took his turn at the weekly ministers' briefing organized by the Ministry of Information. I look at the figures, Doc, over the years, how much we've secured from our mining exploits, whether it is gold, bauxite, diamonds, manganese, and all of that. And all this talk about lithium is cheap for me, especially for young people. Our gold is finite. I always say these resources are finite. Have we ever contemplated 30 years, 40 years, 50 years from now? Some research pieces that I have seen tell us that in 50 years, our gold reserves will be something very far from what we're seeing now. So what we're exploiting must be put to the best use for future generations, because some generations to come will not come and meet the sort of resources we have, but they will still have to deal with global warming, climate change, and all the other, global situations that we are facing. So when I see these, we seem to have this, we're going to get more. But really, how much have we got from these deals? Sometimes you look at the royalties, 3%, 5%, 7%, 10%, while other countries are getting 35%, 50% right here in Africa. Your take, Doc?
Yes, I think you have hit the nail right on the head. It is also a worry for me because, one, we get excited when we see figures like this, we see stories like this, that, we're going to make it. But is that the case? We have seen mining in this country time and again, but we have benefited very little from it. One is because we are not thinking of how we can add value. You can't just be selling raw commodity to the manufacturer elsewhere. Begin to think about how you add value. That is the way to go, and that is what is missing. So every time we talk about we getting new companies coming in, my question is that when can we get our own people to add value to the gold that we get from the soil? That's one thing. And then you also touch on a very important thing, that the contract that we sign in this regard, sometimes you realize that we just give it out to those who are coming to what mine here. And we, who are supposed to be the beneficiary of what God has endowed us with, we lose out in the end. Then the contract doesn't help us. You get very little and they get more and take it away. I think our scholars, especially legal brains in that regard, must look at that and help us in this regard. And then the issue of, yes, we are excited that we are getting people to come and mine, but we are also still being confronted with the problem of what? Galamsey. We are destroying water bodies, we are destroying farmlands, we are destroying the ecosystem in general. And there is very little government is doing in that regard. All that government is interested in welcoming, investors like this and all that. But we want government to turn its attention to maintaining the environment, salvaging the environment, because there's no point we getting all the resources and we come back to battle with health issues, battle with environmental, issues, then everything comes to naught. So I think all in all, they must reflect on all these things seriously and begin to chart a new path. We should have a paradigm shift as not only welcoming investors, but that we force them to do the needful. And that when they cross the line, we should not hesitate to throw them away if that is the rules regarding the game. All right. Once we do that, then we can be sure that we'll be able to maximize the use of such resources and then employ them into the sectors that we need the most in our society.
Let's also look at this story. Heartbreaking. Aveno fire outbreak renders 600 homeless. Also on page 11, destroys 450 wooden structures and metal containers. And at least 600 people have been displaced following a fire outbreak at Aveno Market near the Kwame Nkrumah interchange in Accra Tuesday dawn. This is just yesterday. The inferno also destroyed 450 wooden structures, metal containers used for commercial and domestic purposes. No casualty was recorded. That's the good thing. When Ghanaian Times got to the scene at about 8:30 a.m., victims were at the scene salvaging some items left after the damage. Others were also gathered in small numbers, brooding over the misfortune, with others in shock and discussing the tragedy. Now, despite the sad situation for many, it was a field day for scrap dealers as they searched through the debris for metal. Some of the victims who spoke to the Ghanaian Times said they suspected the fire might have been caused by an electrical fault. A victim identified as Sule Mokhtari said their personal effects and wares had been completely destroyed by the fire and appealed to government to support them. Let's hear from the fire service as well. The Public Relations Officer of the Accra Regional Fire Command, Assistant Divisional Officer, Grade 1, Louis Kwabena Pakfu said the command's firefighters were deployed to the scene immediately they received the distress call. He said fire tenders were deployed from the Kwame Nkrumah Interchange National Headquarters at Bilinkbe and the Accra Regional Headquarters, and that the fire was brought under control at 3:21 a.m. and extinguished at 4:15 a.m. Unfortunately, they couldn't salvage, a whole lot. 450 wooden structures. We know how, if you've been to Aveno, and metal containers, all of them razed to the ground. The only good thing, like I keep saying, no one perished. But it gives us food for thought in terms of what we're doing in housing the masses in this country, the poorest of the poor. We don't have those social systems to cater for them when they're on the streets. We will not provide for them in terms of housing them. We've had so many, what do they even call those projects? Affordable housing projects that have come to nothing. And people live like this. And now, with this happening, 450 wooden structures and metal containers, you can multiply that by about 5 in terms of occupancy. That should give you an idea of how many people would be involved. You'd be reaching something around 2,400 people. Where will they go? What happens to them? Will they add to the numbers on the streets? Will that be even more of a security threat for us as a people? Your take, Doc.
Yes, Ben, my worry over the years is that we as voters, we sometimes shy away from the very important things that we need. All right, these are the things that we have to force politicians to put into their manifesto so that you can, hold them to it. That let us have a facility for what? The poor, the needy, and the vulnerable. You may start a pilot project so that you have a few people in there and gradually we build on that. This thing is missing. When people are going to vote, they are looking for goodies. Very few things, thrown to them, they are happy. And then we forget about very important things that affect us. I believe that going forward, we should look at some of these things, force political parties to put into their manifesto so that we can ensure that they will implement them. Let's have places where the needy, the vulnerable can be there, and then we build on. The aged, all right, we begin to what? Think about them. The second issue is what issue of what planning. Do we have planners in this country, or they are on sabbatical leave? Sometimes I ask myself, because you have all manner of unauthorized, structures along certain lines and certain places and all that. And it seems to me that nobody cares a hoot about their existence. And whenever there is trouble, then we begin to go there, the situation and all that. If we are doing proper planning here, any structure you put at any place, you require the proper, permit to do that, so that we don't, get these occurrences, many times. I think planning must also go in, and then education. People must be educated that look, how you keep fire in some of these places will go a long way to affect you and I. So constant education. I am happy that gradually the fire service, they've been giving us snipers of information about what fire safety and the rest of them. But we want them to intensify their program so that we'll get more education and save people. Then the insensitivity on the part of people. Anytime there is accident, you see people rushing there to go and loot and go and pick things that belong to the affected and then the needy people and all that. You see even accidents. Instead of saving people, people rush there, go and search through people's bags and all that. These things must be a thing of the past. It is even a sorry story, to say the least. We don't have to engage in that. We sympathize with those who are affected, and then we support them any way possible.
Let's get into the Daily Guide newspaper now. Ghana rakes $6.6 billion from gold, and another interesting bit there. Oftentimes you would hear us say, oh, this is how much we've got from gold within this period. And you would see other countries reporting, this is how much we imported from Ghana in terms of gold. And that sum would be even far more than, we are claiming per our official records. This is sometimes I just look at Ghana and wonder, we're a very curious bunch, very curious. Some of the wording I want to use this morning may not be appropriate. So I'm just saying we're a very curious bunch, very interesting bunch of people. We have everything, yet we have nothing. And we keep electing people who also add practically nothing to our lives. And we're so passionate about them. I saw a joke. It's an image recently. And sheep were going to vote. They were voting. One line was voting for a wolf, and the other was voting for a lion. In other words, they are just voting for who eats them. In the end, the value is the same. Interesting bunch. Anyway, gang busted for stealing Lands Commission's 100 million Ghana cedis. Then there's Health Minister dodges Parliament. And there's Mahama begins 2024 campaign. Ghana card to prevent foreigners from voting. Let's get into those stories quickly. I'll take a few of them. And Ghana recorded $6.6 billion in revenue from gold in 2022, making the mining sector the leading source of export revenue for the country. The Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, Samuel Abu-Jinapor, who announced this at the Ministry of Information's Meets the Press series yesterday, said following that significant investment in exploration, 4 new large-scale mining operations would also start production in the next 2 years. We've already told you about those 4. There's also Ghana card to prevent foreigners from voting. Interesting comments there. That's according to the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. And that also, let me just bring this in. She made this comment, passed this comment yesterday. The Ghana card won't be used to vote in 2024 election. You can check that on JoyNews on Facebook. That's according to Jean Mensah. Of course, it's the registration process. So to register for the ongoing registration, you would require the Ghana card. But the Ghana card itself won't be used to vote. Health Minister dodges Parliament. And yesterday he was given 2 hours to appear in Parliament, and he failed to do so, to answer critical questions. And Mahama has begun his 2024 campaign as well. And former President Mahama has announced that he will officially launch his campaign and his bid to lead the NDC into the 2024 general elections on Thursday, March the 2nd, 2023, which is tomorrow. Quick takes on these stories?
Yeah, I'll look at the NIA card that is not going to, they are not going to use, get a new one, and then we are going to maintain what we have, and then there's a continuous registration. I think I welcome that, because if you look at advanced democracies such as Denmark, that is what they have, and other jurisdictions, that as soon as you have an important document like that, now you continue to add to it, so that the child is born and quickly the name is in. By the time he gets to the voting age, is already there, so that the trouble that always, affect us when we are going to vote, we need to go and register. There's trouble, legal battles, and all that will be a thing of the past. So once we have a very perfect or a very good document, let me put it this way, a very good document that will stand the test of time, let's continue to add, but we'll make sure that the names that go in are the best. There are a lot of security measures that I must commend the NIA for having introduced, so that anybody who want to be funny and want to throw something illegal in, you risk having your fingers bent with regards to what the laws of the land. So I think we need to jealously guard this process and make it work. All that I'm asking for is that government will release the appropriate resources for NIA people to do their work, and then the process will also go on to get the grounds ready for the battle of 2024. Let me move on to another important thing, which is Mahama's campaign. Mahama has started his campaign, and I think it's a good thing. Now he's going to, scan the whole system, and then the pre-election phase, he wants to do the needful by, picking information. This is time to pick information and strategize, and then begin to identify the problems of this country, and then you begin to prepare towards a manifesto development, and you begin to have a strategy for campaign message development and all that. It's a whole lot of exercise, and I know, having been on the seat before president, he has seen it all. So I'm sure his team is ready to put resources together. It's my hope and prayer that all these things that we are doing in terms of campaign and all that, it will be incident-free, and that we'll be able to throw out messages that resonate with the people, and then make sure that the people get the best from what campaigns are all about. That is all that we are asking from Mr. Mahama and his team.
Right. In other stories, Macaroni alleges death threats. A Nigerian content creator and activist, Adebowale Debo Adedayo, popularly known as Mr. Macaroni, has revealed the death threat he received over his involvement in Nigeria's February 25 election. According to him, he tweeted a screenshot of the death threat sent to him via his email, which stated that he should thank God if he survives this year. We had some prominent, people, actors, actresses, and others also competing in that election. There's also India Commission launches Year of Millet, and according to the High Commissioner, the consumption and production of millet has a greater potential of alleviating poverty and food shortage in deprived countries in the global south. Those are two interesting stories there to cap it off. Do you have any reactions, or should we move on to the Finder newspaper?
I think we can go on to the Finder newspaper.
Right. Yeah. So 100 million Ghana cedis released to NIA to clear part of its debt to creditors. And the finance minister yesterday in Parliament gave us a bit of a briefing on some of these matters. Interesting that we had to wait till there was talk of it. The NIA boss had to come out and say that, look, we owe this much, and so we are not even able to proceed with card printing. Let's get into that story. The other story there is from the Lands and Natural Resources Minister, which we've already looked at. So government has released 100 million Ghana cedis to the National Identification Authority as the first tranche of payments to clear debts owed creditors. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta who disclosed this in Parliament, explained that 80 million Ghana cedis was paid first and 20 million Ghana cedis was paid yesterday. According to him, government had reached an agreement with Cowbank on timelines to clear the debt NIA owes its creditors. The finder has learned that NIA owes suppliers and bankers that has been negotiated with all creditors amounts to about $117 million, not cedis. The Electoral Commission and the NIA briefed Parliament on their readiness to implement proposed constitutional instruments ahead of the 2024 polls as well. What do you make of this? I mean, the rest of the story touches on reducing the usual pressure at registration centers by using the Ghana card, that the Ghana card will not replace the voter identification or voter ID, and that there will be no new register, and the 17.3 million registered and the 2.5 million left to be registered. All of that was spoken of. But what do you make of the fact that the NIA, which is overseeing the rollout of the Ghana card, owes to the tune of $117 million? We're talking about 100 million cedis. That is a drop in a bucket. Your take?
It's unfortunate that an important exercise like this, that we have tasked the gentleman to do, we are not ready to support him with resources to carry out. And yet we get the courage to attack him, that he has not delivered, there is a problem and all that. That's unfair, all right? It is when you've given him resources and he's not able to deliver, on the back of that, then you can chastise him or take a swipe at him. But that said, I think that we need to be serious about what is important for us. Election is so critical, and it's you and I know its effect on the stability of the country and all that. So we expect that whatever we do, we need to be able to marshal resources to support any effort at making elections work. Because as Professor Jimabwedi wrote in one of his work, there's a cost for doing nothing, and we don't want to get closer to that. So all that we need to do is to apply our resources very efficiently. We know what is in the best interest of us. We push in resources, and then we do. Every time people who have been given the mandate to do some of these things, when they are out shouting, crying, canvassing for resources, it becomes problematic. You ask yourself whether those who employ them are ready to finance them to do their work. Recently, you heard the OSP that he is office to resources he doesn't have and all that. This thing must cease in this country because we have resources, except that with the judicious use of resources is our problem. And I don't see why it should be a problem if we get our priorities right.
Just quickly on this, be circumspect in dealing with land issues, as Santahene warns chiefs. He's actually had to basically wrench some land from the Amakom Hene and give it to an individual. And he was addressing the Bantama Hene Bafo Wusu Amankwetia the 6th and Amakom Hene Nanaedu Mensasari, who have recently been summoned by the Asante Hene for embroiling themselves in some land sale controversy. So Otumfuo having to intervene in there. Then U.S. Embassy equips media with tools to enhance accountable governance. I'm talking about the Ghana News Agency, the New Times Corporation, the Graphic Communications Group Limited, Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, the Fourth Estate, that is the Media Foundation for West Africa, Corruption Watch Center for Democratic Development, and the National Media Commission. All of them got laptops from the U.S. Embassy. Those stories in there. Any quick reactions as we get ready to wrap? Hello, Doc.
The U.S. support for development of media program in this country, I support and I commend them. U.S. is one of the partners in this industry who have, giving continuous support for journalism work in this country. It's very good. We thank them. A few years ago, the Germans were doing that, taking people for training, even in Germany and the rest of them. All right. So I believe that other embassies will also emulate same and support the media to grow. You and I know that without development of the media and democratic, institutions like that, our democracy will not go anywhere. But that we also have to be responsible in the maintaining whatever they give to us so that we can ensure value for money. That is the way to go. That's the way to go.
Let's take a look at the Ghanaian publisher. Gold export raising 6.6 billion. We've already looked at that. Ghana card, not voter ID card substitute. That's according to the EC. And then MPs mad, angry over vaccine shortage. I'm sure recently you've heard those vaccines for children, for rubella, polio, and the rest that were in short supply. And guess what? The health minister was invited to Parliament and he failed to show up. And it wouldn't be the first time. Yesterday he was given 2 hours to appear and he simply didn't show up. I have said in sharing some of my blunt thoughts that any country that has a health minister who would wait for there to be a shortage in these crucial, children are the most vulnerable in any society. In some places, 2 months it's been in short supply. What happens to those children who need these vaccines? In any proper jurisdiction, that minister would have resigned. But we've seen the COVID wahala. We've seen this, and this person is still opposed. Any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's becoming one too many on the part of, those who manage the health needs of our people, all right? It's not a good thing because, as you rightly said, children are the most vulnerable and the most precious that we need to protect at all times. We have signed the Children's Act into law and that we will give them support all the time, all right? Let us demonstrate that what we are put in the Constitution is what we are doing on the ground by supporting them and all that. And all boils down to the fact that there is poor planning. We don't plan properly, and then we are taking, by events. We are taking by events. And when it happens like that, we blame it on any other thing apart from we ourselves, what we have done. But I think we must up our game in this regard.
Doc, thank you so much for your time. But before we go, on the BBC, I just spied this. Greece train crash. Survivors describe nightmarish seconds. And at least 32 people have died and dozens more were injured in the head-on collision between two trains near the city of Larissa on Tuesday night. Rescuers have been working through the night to find survivors. According to one Stergios Minenis, we heard a big bang, said 28-year-old passenger Stergios Minenis, who jumped to safety from the wreckage. For 10-15 seconds, it was chaos, tumbling over, fires, cables hanging, broken windows, people screaming, people trapped. That must have been horrific, and we commiserate with them. 32 people losing their lives in Greece. Just a few seconds reflection on that.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, and we commiserate with them. It's unfortunate that it has happened. We know they'll put structures in place so that we don't have a recurrence of that. But I'm surprised that all the newspapers shy away from Nigerian election, which is very important.
I made mention of a bit of it, I think, at some point. But maybe just your final thoughts then. Bola Tinubu, 70-year-old. People have spoken about how we have all these very old people at the helm of affairs in Africa. Compared to the West, look at their averagely 30-something, 40-something, 50, Here we seem to be going a certain route. And with all the problems that have mired these elections, in some 30 seconds, quick thoughts, since you brought it up.
If you look, I want to look at the election. I realized that there were problems in the pre-election phase. Issue of delay in voting as a result of lack of materials at the right time. And then issue of violence that characterized some of the places. We also saw issue of corruption in some of the places as well. But on the day of election and beyond that, the interesting thing is that one would have thought that you would see ethnicity playing a role in Nigeria, because Nigeria, take it or leave it, is divided along 3 ethnic lines: the Hausa North, the Yoruba and Igbo South, and all that. And if you see the permutation of the flag bearers and their running mates, one would have thought that we'll have some ethnic dimension, but it did not work. It did not work. And interestingly, one would have also expected APC to lose the election. I think, for me, because if you look at Boko Haram insurgents, issue of kidnapping, issue of poor economy, rising inflation, and unemployment, and against the fact that you have about 43% of the youth who are unemployed. One would have thought that the scale would tilt for PDP because in Nigeria, take it or leave it, people were rooting for Obi, but I knew that he was not going to win because the country was naturally party system and that the two parties are entrenched, that any other third force will not be recognized, even though I recognize that you have about 166 million youth who were ready to vote and all that. But as to whether they cast their vote for APC was another thing. But we commend Nigeria. My prayer is that after election, all right, whatever differences that they have, they should go to court and seek redress than resorting to violence and undermine democracy in Nigeria, in Africa.
Brilliant points you've made. Thank you so much, Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, for joining the conversation. He is a political scientist and the director of the Center for European Studies at the University of Ghana. Before we go into sports, you know this segment is brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, and we are offering free prostate screening and free female fertility screening. Locate us in Accra Spintex, opposite the Shell signboard, in Kumasi Kronum here behind the Angel Educational Complex, Takrade Anaji Estate, Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswa, and Esiama Enzima. You can reach us on 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. Up next on the AM show, we serve you sports. Do stay.